How do you work with actors?
I have a great time working with actors, and pretty much all the actors I've worked with still like me, so that's a good sign. I when I'm working with actors, I really try to focus on the early stages. One is just getting them to feel comfortable with me, because they're putting a lot of faith in me as a director, that I'm going to steer them in the right direction, that I know what I'm talking about. You know, every actor, especially, you know, people who are starting out or that do a lot of supporting work, so many of them get thrown into these just terrible movies where they're almost ashamed they were part of it. And so they're putting a lot of faith in me as a director and as a writer that, that I'm going to deliver for them. And so kind of get them to comfortable, let them know kind of my vision, who I see their character as, what I see it saying, all of that. But then I work with them to feel really comfortable with their understanding of the character. Even before we get into lines, really talking with them, who did they see their character as? What is, when a character does this in a scene, do you have any questions about that? Or is there any questions you have about your character? I really want them to feel like they know that person, and that for when they're playing them, they're not thinking about notes they had. There's nothing worse. I mean, there's a lot of actors' process, and each of them has their own process. Some of them write a very complicated chart that tracks their character's arc and their choices throughout the whole film, which is great because you want, if that's how they do it, you want them to feel like they know their character and they understand it and they can see the whole thing. But the last thing you want to see is when they're performing, you don't want to see them thinking about those notes. You want them to be living in the moment. And so getting them to the point where they trust they know the character, that's when I know I have a good performance. Once we get to that stage, I start feeling really good about it. When we're doing Frey, Brian, we worked on his walk for days, getting his walk down to where you could see that he had the physical wound, but you could also see he was trying to hide it. Him spending that time with those veterans was a huge breakthrough for him. It changed his own personal perspective on it. He actually said to me after that, he goes, I was really excited about this movie because it's an incredible role, and I, really feel like it's a great opportunity for me as an actor. But after meeting these guys, he's like, all I can think about now is I just hope I can do their story justice. And that to me was when it changed. It became for him, it wasn't about playing a role. It became real to him. He saw the lives that those guys had, and obviously I couldn't do that with the vampire film. But part of it with them was, the casting. Vanya's from Serbia, Gabby's from Hungary, and so they come from the worlds that these vampires are from. They had that folklore and stuff growing up, so that was a big part of it already. Naturally, their accent is there, so we have to come up with some cheesy Dracula accent. But then helping them understand and find those connections that they have to them personally. And then from there, creating on set an environment where they feel safe to take risks, to not feel like if they flub a line that I'm going to be upset with them. And for Vanya, part of it, he's an amazing talent, but English isn't his first language. He struggled with some of my dialogue, so allow him the freedom to make it his own. And some of his improv in it and some of the lines he came up with was so much better than what I wrote. He has some throwaway lines that still make me laugh, and I've seen the film 1,000 times now. So allowing them to really personalize it and make it themselves, and not feeling like as the writer-director that I'm losing my vision because they're taking something in a new way. It's almost like, okay, let's go for this ride. Let's see where they take me now. And I just find like that just helps. It's empowering to them, keeps them from feeling like they're walking on eggshells, that, worrying about making a mistake. But then also not being afraid to correct them. If something's really, if the choice isn't right, having that conversation, catching them early on it, feeling like, again, if you have that trust, they're going to respect when I speak up and I'm like, no, that's not how your character would go. We can have that discussion. They can understand why. Had that with Vanya, had that with Gabby, had that with Brian, had that with all my actors, where you have that moment where it's like, it's great. I like what you were trying to do there, but let's think about it from this perspective of why your character wouldn't do that. And I always say if I can't justify a choice, it's not the right choice. So with any actor, I always have that justification. Otherwise, let them do it their way. If I'm going to give them a note, there's going to be a reason for it. Otherwise, I want them to feel like they've got it.
What are the pros and cons of working with non-actors? You know, when you see movies sometimes, let's say Winter's Bone, where you're like, you know what, those are real people, it seems like for the most part in the background, and it really lends to the film. And just from watching the trailer of Frey, I think you had said that there were non-actors in it, but it really made me feel like I was there in a town, a small town, logging area.
It's for any film, I think it can be great. If you want to have authenticity, just use the real people. It makes a world of difference because, you know, great character actors can embody interesting characters for sure. But there is still something different from an actor playing somebody like that versus the real person. That's their life and that's what they do. So authenticity is the greatest attribute of it. For a low budget film, you know, there's no way on a movie like that I was gonna be able to cast and afford 30 great extras or you know, supporting roles and stuff like that. Like I can only bring on so many people, and I would rather have somebody who's real and maybe not the best actor versus a bad actor who's not real. You know, if you threw like there's a scene where he's interviewing for a job at a Dairy Queen, and Becky was the actual manager of that Dairy Queen, who does the scene in the interview. Now, she just had to be herself. She was doing an actual job interview. It just happened to be on camera, and she was nervous and everything, but we got her comfortable, and she did it. And with non-actors, I don't give them dialogue. I give them point A and point B. Now just be you. And then the actor, you know, Brian was great at improv, so he could go with it. He could roll with it. He knew things he had to get across, so he would steer it that way. So that's part of having a very talented actor to work with that can steer a scene like that. But with Becky, I was just like, okay, you're interviewing him. He's got to have these qualifications. You've got to ask him about this, and then just do a normal interview. And then trust also that you can pull it off in editing and make it work. So that was a big thing, and one of my favorite moments from that was when LA Weekly put out their review. They ended the review quoting Becky. She actually had a line in that that when she said it, I was just like, that's better than anything I will ever write. It was a question she asked him, what do you think qualifies you to work at this establishment? And he retorts back, well, you know, I did 5 tours of duty here, but I don't see how that'll help me at it, you know. And her response back is, well, it can be a battlefield in here sometimes, especially during the summer. I'm just like, I would have never thought of that, and that's the greatest answer to that ever. And I love the fact that this woman who's a manager at a Dairy Queen in the coastal mountains of Oregon was literally quoted in the LA Weekly. So that's the beauty of having a non-actor, is they can bring that level of realness to it. That's their daily life, and so if you just let them be themselves. But that's the hard part as a director, is you can't direct them. You literally give them the scenario and then just trust them to be themselves, and then hopefully you get what you need out of it. So you're also not getting a lot of takes. You do more than 2 or 3 takes, they start getting self-conscious, and then you've lost them.